Okay, so skill 43, identify and circle the locators. So locators are parts of the question where they tell you where to look. And this is why it's possible for most students to entirely skip reading the passage, right? That you could just skip the passage, go right to the questions, because the questions tell you where to find the answer. All right, let's look at some examples. So around 50% of questions work like this. They tell you exactly where to look, right? They say, according to figure 1 or according to table 2. And the most important thing here is that you should, in that case, underline, and I'll underline, oops, that's a thick line, but underline that locator, right? One of the most common mistakes students make is looking at table 2 instead of table 1. So putting an underline under it makes a huge difference and lets your eye focus exactly where it needs to go, okay? So that's first one, the table 1, the figure 1, that stuff. And then there are also secondary locators, right? Secondary locators tell you where to look within the table, for example. So let's look at this example. According to figure 2, we're going to underline that, over the altitude range from 16 kilometers to 26 kilometers, that's the secondary locator. That's telling you where to look specifically in figure 2. You're going to have to look at just that part, the 16 to 26 part, right? Blah, blah, blah. What was the approximate maximum value of the O3 partial pressure and blah, blah, blah. So then you have to look at those specific tables. I mean, you can even call that like a third locator, but that's maybe going a little bit too far. So let's look at another example. According to the results of experiment 1, right? So we are going to underline experiment 1. Eggs of which of the 3 species suffered less than 5% mortality when exposed to UVB? So I would underline less than 5%, right? That's the part within experiment 1 that you're looking at, right? So, I mean, questions like both of these, you don't actually have to read anything. Like you could just do the question, look at the question, go to the chart, and answer the question based only on the chart. There's nothing in the text that you would need to read to get these questions right, which is again why it can be so useful to just skip the passage and go write these and at least get these going. Eventually you're going to have to read most things in most passages, but you won't ever really have to read everything for an entire science section. Just a few passages you'll have to read everything. So then there are questions where they're pointing you to a specific part of the text, right, as opposed to a graph or a table. So let's look at this one. What was the purpose of the first procedure that was carried out on day 1, right? So this isn't going to be answered in a graph or a chart. This is going to be answered in the textual part where they talk about the procedures, right? There's probably day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and you have to read day 1 really carefully and then figure out, mostly based on, for something like this, your kind of understanding of procedures and science a little bit, why they did that. Usually it's pretty straightforward and obvious, and you don't want to overthink something like that. All right, and then sometimes they just point you to someplace in the text, but not exactly where. So based on the information provided, how many grams of solid NaCl would have had to be dissolved in water to prepare 1,000 grams of the NaCl dicer? So you're going to have to here look at, okay, what is the NaCl dicer and where are they talking about dissolving it in water and stuff like that? And you're going to have to read that text pretty carefully. The big clue that you're going to have to read the text is because it says based on the information provided, right? That means that's in the text. That usually is just a clue to okay, it's not in a chart, it's not in a graph, it's in the information, which is like textual information. Okay, so that's a big clue. So that's pretty much it. Again, the most important thing is underline these locators so that you don't look at the wrong places. Okay, and then you're going to be in much better shape.